Hey everybody, welcome to Sex is Medicine. I am your host, Miss Davy Ward Erickson, and I am delighted that you are joining us for another incredible episode of Sex is Medicine, your number one resource for holistic sex education. Today, we are having our Ask a Sexologist panel, and I have my queens of consciousness here with me. Starting in the upper left-hand corner, we have Sequita Whitfield. Below Sequita, we have Lucia Vasquez. I'm sorry I pronounced that incorrectly. My accent is terrible. And then we have Karen Craig underneath me. And we are taking on the issue of the movie Cuties and WAP. So the controversial things that have arisen in mainstream media in the last 4 to 6 weeks, all about female sexual expression, or I'll say women with vaginas, how we are allowed to express ourselves, if at all, what it should look like, and what age is it appropriate for us to start expressing our sexuality? That's a good question, right? So we're going to explore all of that because of these things that have occurred in the world, and it's causing a lot of conversation and controversy and all that stuff. So we're going to start with Cuties. So we all watched the movie this weekend so that we would be well prepared, because I made the asshole mistake of commenting on this on a Facebook thread before I had ever watched it, right? So what I saw some clips that were in the news and some commentary that was in the news. And instead of doing my own investigative journalism, I just watched those clips and read the commentaries, and I was like, oh yeah, this is disgusting. How dare they? They're promoting pedophilia. Down, burn it down, down with Netflix, right? So I just kind of like grabbed that bone and I ran with it. And then when I watched the movie, I was like, oh shit. This movie has nothing to do with what we thought it, what media and the news is saying it had to do with. And it's actually a really thoughtful and provocative movie about coming of age in a really kind of fucked up world. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So we've all watched it. What were your guys' thoughts about it? Whoever wants to start first.
Well, I mean, for me, the first thing that was really interesting, it's really an art house movie. I mean, it was originally shown at Sundance. So it wasn't like, kind of designed to be this mainstream, at the theater movie. And I think actually a lot of the hubbub around it were people who hadn't actually seen it, like these politicians.
Exactly.
who hadn't actually seen it. So they're on, this is sex trafficking and child pornography, and the Department of Justice needs to investigate and all of that. And then so people, when they actually watch it, I mean, that is what it is. It's like this young, prepubescent girl trying to navigate, or a group of girls trying to navigate between, sort of that childhood and adulthood, and what does all that look like? What does sexuality look like? And all of those things. And I mean, what strikes me the most is that this controversy really should give rise to conversation, instead of like burn it down. Because that's what the director intended.
Yes.
By creating the movie to begin with. And it should be this conversation around like these two worlds that like our kids really have to live in, where it's like what it means to be a woman, it's like being a wife and a mother and, chaste and wear a white bra, and all of that, and, like nice big panties. And then this other world where everybody's twerking and, all the social media people and the videos and the video vixens and, and it's always been that way. I mean, that's what strikes me is like, because at first I was like, now what's the issue? Because it was like, as long as I can remember, it was like really these two very stark, images of what sexuality is, what it means to be a woman. So
the Madonna whore complex.
Exactly.
Which has been part of our society since the dawn of Madonna.
Yeah.
not the Star
Not-
Madonna,
not-
you know, the Virgin Mother. Ever
Right.
since people decided that virgins could have babies, it's been an issue. So what are your thoughts, Lucia? What struck you in watching it?
Yeah, it's very similar to, Karen's. I read a lot of comments about it. There was a lot of negativity going into it, and I thought, well, gosh, what on earth are they doing? And so I watched the movie, and there were some parts that were difficult, but there were many parts that I could really relate to it.
Yeah.
And so coming from an educator's point of view, this film is about what happens to young girls when they have access to the internet and everything in the world outside, and the journey of becoming a woman, and what that looks like when these girls aren't given a strong support system. And so it's like that because of our society, right?
Yes.
There's this huge patriarch society, an overly strict cultures and religious beliefs and all that. And so when you don't give children the knowledge and the right tools, to navigate through these things that are out in the world, then they're just not going to be prepared. There was a couple of scenes that stood out for me, and those were the one where one of the girls had put a condom into their mouths, right? And so, again, not being educated enough to know what it even is for, what's it used for, and these girls are sitting there freaking out, putting, soap on the tongue of the person's mouth, and so that was very interesting. And then there was another part here where the coming of a woman, right? So there's the period, right? So the topic of the period. I, could definitely relate to that because it was very similar for me growing up, where I didn't have a good relationship with my mom, right? And so there was no clear communication of what on earth a period is and what age is it going to take place. And this is what you need to do when it happens, and luckily I was very conscious and aware of watching my mother all the time in the restroom. And I saw, her using pads, and I saw that there was what looked like blood was on the pads, right? And so when it came time to my turn having it, I didn't freak out. I knew this is what it was. This is something coming out of my vagina here, and it looks similar to what I saw my mom's, and so I knew where the pads were, and so I just kind of grabbed them. And then my mom over time just started buying more because she saw obviously somebody was using them. So it still was not a topic for me growing up. It's still, even at that point, it was not a topic.
I can't even believe that your mom's just like, oh, I have less pads than I used to. Like, you doesn't even like, hey, have you started, like, no conversation at all? Oh my God. I'm not shaming your mom for that, but I'm just saying, like, that's how deeply, like, disassociated and like fearful the culture is about talking about sex. It's like you just kind of notice it and buy more pads.
Right.
Oh my God.
Exactly. And so a lot of things in the movie I could really relate to because it just wasn't a topic that was discussed in my entire family. Yeah. And so now, becoming sexologist and an authentic tantra practitioner, I'm so, very grateful for other tools that I have been given that I can, now pass down to my own kids. There's still a lot of things that I did not know about. There were many, many things, and anatomy was one of them. And so, that's such a huge thing and a huge concern that parents and the school systems are not having an open conversation about. Yeah. And my whole take is that, if you're not, there's so many people that allow their children to have these social media accounts even, but they're not willing to have these kind of conversations.
Yes.
And so these are some things that can take place when it's left out.
Wow, huge, incredible point, Lucia. You know, if we as parents aren't willing to have that conversation with our children, you better bet that somebody else is willing to have that conversation. And exactly, with social media and the internet, it's like it's there in their face. So if you're not talking to them, somebody else is. Yeah. What were your thoughts, Sequita?
Oh my.
So many. So many.
I did the same thing you did, Davey. I jumped to conclusions. I saw the poster on my Netflix feed. I automatically got a resentment and an angry, and how dare they sexualize these little girls. I'm not gonna watch the movie. Made all these snap judgments. And then when you invited me to this panel, I thought, oh shit, I gotta watch it. And so first, I watched the director's explanation of why she did it. I wanted to know what was her thinking behind this film before I went in to see the film. And she was all about, reclaiming our femininity and how we can help young girls progress and make the transition from being a young girl to a woman, and not be victimized, so to speak, by a patriarchal, dominated society, around sexuality. And so once I got behind her thinking, and I really appreciated that she had a child psychologist on set, that the parents were involved, the parents were activists about femininity, and feminist. So it was much more a positive, uplifting atmosphere than what is portrayed, and then Netflix aired that poster without her consent. So she's taken the heat for what the media did. She's getting threats and, and she's being, beat up on. And like you and I did, we didn't investigate first, So now I have to walk it back and, apologize for my own ignorance in doing that, And so once I was able to, get behind her in this film, when I started to watch the film, it immediately brought up my own awkwardness at that age, being 11, tall, lanky, black, misfit, wanting to fit in, wanting to belong, and being the new kid on the block, because we were in the military, so we got to travel a little bit, so I was always trying to fit in, where do I fit in? And so that immediately, brought up some of that awkwardness and attention-seeking behavior. That was me. That was me, man. I'm looking for love in all the wrong places. Just trying to be noticed, be seen. When she started lying and stealing, I was like, I was the best liar and the best stealer, because it made me feel something, and so it just, like I said earlier, it just really brought up a lot of my own stuff, and I'm really grateful because I get to really look at it through someone else's eyes, and not be ashamed about it and not beat myself up about it, and and all that stuff, and just accept it. The seduction of young girls through hip hop culture and videos and their own families, because it's generational. If you've got families that are sex workers or work in strip clubs, or it's normalized and they make good money at it, then young girls see that as a way of, the more they are over-sexualized, the more successful they are. Let's look at Kim Kardashian and that whole genre of, So yeah, this movie was just like Karen said, it really needs to bring up a conversation about when she started her period. I was lucky that my mother was a nurse and sat me down and said, this is what's going to happen and this is what you're going to do. But we didn't go into sex. We didn't go into, and so when the mother looked at her daughter and said, now you're a woman, I was like, what the? She's 11 years old. No, she's not a woman. You know, and then she walked out of the room. I'm like, no explanation, no, you know, like you said, let's not discuss it. And so for her behavior, for me throughout the movie, all the attention seeking behavior, and there were no consequences for her. You know, there was no adult supervision. There was no, you know, someone there to say, you know, you're going to be okay. Let's, yeah, I can go on. I can go on.
And exactly, we could go on like all day because that movie is so nuanced. Like that was the thing that stood out to me, like right from the get-go. I was like, oh, this is completely different than what people think it is, than what I thought it was. And like there's like the texture of it and the nuance and all these, they're so multi-layered. I mean, it's almost impossible to tease it out, right? So the idea that this is a conversation starter, exactly correct. And a few of the things that stood out for me initially, like with the protagonist, the 11-year-old girl, Ami, her choices, I love the way it depicted so clearly, her choices for womanhood were either this oppressive, repressive, and not just about sexuality, but about choice. She saw her mother put in untenable, impossible positions and be shamed for expressing her displeasure at them. So that is her upbringing. It's like, as a woman, your what it is to be a woman is duty and drudgery. It's not fun. It sucks. And you're basically robbed of your choice. And then you have to watch your husband fucking other women. And then you need to cook dinner for her too. Like, right. That's what it is to be a respectable woman. Or you can be this flamboyant, expressive. So what I saw her, like her attraction to this, you know, to the kind of sexualized stuff was more about freedom of expression. It was like in her home, there's no room for expression. If you have a vagina, doesn't matter what you think, say, or do, like your function is set. And then this whole other realm, like with her little friend, she's watching them express themselves. And that was like her need for self-expression moved her towards that journey. That's what I saw in that way. And I also saw, again, and I see this often in our society, the crime of there being no rites of passage for us in the Western world between childhood and, you know, as a marker between what it is to be a child to what it is to be an adolescent in moving into adulthood. We just want to ignore adolescence, right? Like, you know, it doesn't exist. But kids, humans are able to have babies at 11 or 12 years old. That's a fucking reality. We need to address that. Like when life expectancy was 30 years old, girls were getting married at 11. That's the whole reason the Kama Sutra exists, was to train men how to train their 11-year-old girls and how to have sex with them so that they could have happy marriages. Like that's the social context of the Kama Sutra. So this movie, I think, really, you know, shed even greater light on the fact that there are the harm that is being done to us as a society and having no rites of passage from girlhood into womanhood.
Yeah.
Right. And what that looks like to be a sexually mature woman. Because circling into WAP, which means, for those of you who don't know, wet ass pussy, which, hello, I aspire to every day. Like, can I please have a wet ass pussy? Like, you know, I mean, unabashed, unashamed, adult female sexual expression should be uncensored. It should, as adults, you should, as a woman, be able to express your sexuality however you want. But what's appropriate for me as an adult is not necessarily what's appropriate for me as a child, right? And so having a way to navigate that really like uncertain and scary terrain between childhood into womanhood, and how do we do that safely? Because I saw these little girls making postures. Dude, they had no fucking idea what they were doing. They didn't know. They're like, oh, I'm gonna put a finger in my mouth. Like they had no clue, right? They don't know why that's sexy at all.
They didn't know. But when in the movie, when Ami was tussling her cousin over the phone, remember? And she started to seduce him.
Yes,
that
exactly.
broke my heart.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, where did that come from? Where, you know, how did she know that if I unbutton my shirt and unbutton my pants, then I may get what I want? Where did that come from?
Well, and I think part of that, I agree, is media. So female sexuality is a commodity.
Yeah.
Right? That it can be used. I mean, and it's not, I want to say that I don't want to put the blame on like female rappers. Like, I remember growing up and going into car garages and seeing posters of half naked blonde women with implants selling Budweiser.
Right.
Like, it's not rap. Rap is not to blame for the commodification of female sexuality. That's media. That's been, you know, Playboy Penthouse, like right there, right? And again, I mean, you know, and that's the thing. Where's the line? Because I celebrate. Like, if yay, women are naked and we get to see them. I think that's awesome. I like seeing naked women. And the way that it's used as a tool to manipulate, right? So it's not the thing, it's the motivation and the intention. The way it's used as a tool to manipulate, that's what's toxic and harmful.
Well, and it's really the objectification of women and of women's bodies. And that has been the commodity, like women's bodies, you know, the bodies of women of color, you know, for all kinds of things, you know, from Budweiser to nursing babies to selling cars to, you know, like all these videos. That's what I was so shocked about with when WAP first came out and there was all this controversy. And I was like, I mean, what am I in a time warp here? You know, because I mean, men have been doing this like literally forever, you know, I mean, it's like naked, I mean, literally naked women, you know, on these videos. So they have the little blurry things so you can't see the parts, but it's like they're clearly naked. You know, the most they may have on is thongs, you know, and they're talking about smashing it and hitting it from the back and drilling it. And I mean, like everything but honoring it, you know, and you know, I mean, so it's like, so then when she was singing about it, and it's like, well, Madonna, you know, was doing it 20, 30 years before, and Lil Kim and all them. So, I mean, for me, yeah, like, I was like, what? Now, explain this to me again. Like, what's the issue? Like, I literally printed out the lyrics because I was like wanting to see, like, what could possibly be, you know, I mean, like, I was around when Tipper Gore, you know, helped to create the parental advisory. And I think one of the first songs was a Prince song that had the word masturbation in it. You know, so, I mean, this has been going, this is not new.
It's not a new conversation.
You know, yeah. So, I mean.
Well, and I think it's really interesting that the shit hits the fan when it's people with vaginas who are, you know, singing about their sexual pleasure versus, like, I'm thinking when I was a little kid, I was into heavy metal, AC/DC, Def Leppard, and like in the videos, again, there are these women posing on cars and that sort of thing. And so again, when it's there for the male gaze, right? When it's an object to flaunt success for people with penises, then it's acceptable and it's okay. But if it's a person with a vagina saying, hey, I like having a wet pussy and I want to fuck real hard, then it's a problem.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lucia.
Yeah, I was just going to comment off of your, what you had mentioned, Sequita, about, you know, where did she come off of the idea of exposing herself, you know, to get the phone, right? And I was just going to add that I also believe that she was not only gathering it from what she was seeing on, you know, on the internet, but also what she was even seeing in the own home, as far as her seeing that there's a second wife coming, there's all these gifts coming, new wardrobe, there's this glamorous, fabulous bedroom for them, you know, and she gets a glimpse of what she looked like, right? And just draped in this white garment. And so she's in that moment of, okay, well, she's connecting these things together. And so I believe that, you know, it was part of, okay, I want this phone. Let me give you what you want, what I think you want. And then I can get what I want.
Beautiful.
You know? And
wow,
so
Lucia.
that's where, you know, I when I saw that, I thought to myself, shit, you know, I have done, you know, similar things. You know, not that, but I have done I've used, when I was in my young 20s and I would go out clubbing, for example, I didn't want to stay in the damn long ass line, right? So I knew I could flaunt myself, right, and show my breasts, right, to the security guard, and hey, can you get me and my girls in? You know, oh, okay, good, because they're looking at me, and that's it, right? And that's how we got in, you know. And so it's things like that and I wasn't taught that. It was just that, you know, nobody told me this is what you can and cannot do. It's just that you start seeing everything that's happening in the world and what others are doing, and it's like you pick up on it, right? And so,
well, humans are adaptive. We're not stupid. I mean, we've survived for, you know, however many millennia figuring shit out on our own. So exactly, that point is so salient, Lucia, that it wasn't just the what she seemed, which is what people want to blame, but this ideal of what it is to be a respectable woman gives us that same messaging. What were you going to say, Lucia?
Well, you know, that loops back around to WAP, because there's a lyric that I take affront to, but then I'm like, hell yeah, you know. When she says, I don't cook, I don't clean, let me tell you how I got this ring. You know, it's like, this wet ass pussy is how I got this ring. And I'm like, damn it, you're saying it out loud. Don't quiet
part out loud.
Don't tell the secret. You know, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, on one hand, I applaud, like you said, I'm like, yes, do that. Be yourself. Say what we say behind closed doors out loud. And then that little place in me, that little where shame hides, and you know, and that prude person says, don't do that. You know, don't say it out loud. And that's my dilemma.
Yeah.
I am all about that WAP. And now that I know even more through, you know, authentic tantra and being a sexologist and embracing my own sexuality as a woman over 60, almost 65, and coming into this kind of late, it's like, I want to make a video.
Okay, that's the next episode. Let me support you in this.
You know, I want to get on this train, but I'm telling you, it's like I said earlier, it's just like I'm all over the place, because it's just waking up all those places within me that need to be healed.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I mean, why there's so much controversy about both of these issues, right? Because it's waking up, you know, it's showing us our own wounds. And I think the overall thing that, you know, I think we should agree with as a society is our current engagement with sexuality is wounded. It's on so many layers, right? Yeah. And so that's why it's so threatening when other people are doing shit that's triggering for us. It's terrifying. It's triggering our own wounds. And because of that, we don't have the space to just live and let live. Like, you know, if Cardi B wants to walk around, you know, swiping noses in her labia like credit cards, good for her. Like, let her do her thing. That doesn't mean you have to do it. You know, you do sex the way you want to do sex, and I'm gonna do sex the way I want to do sex. And as long as we're not, you know, causing each other harm or causing our partners harm, yay, right? But it's such a, because of the centuries of repression and disassociation and the religious conditioning and the trauma and all of that, it's like we're not operating with a clean slate, right? It's not like we're like innocently looking at this with no preconceived anything, judgments going on. We're looking at this from wounded eyes as a society. So it's going to trigger that trauma.
Yeah. And so someone asked me, an educator asked me, well, what's our responsibility to young girls watching the WAP video? I didn't have an answer. I really don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are your guys' thoughts on it? What is the responsibility for us as adults, for us as sexologists? Lucia, how do you talk to your daughters about things like that, if you feel comfortable sharing that?
Oh yeah. Oh no, I'm very open with my kids. And they always nag me, Mom, we already heard this conversation, you know, and because they knew I had mentioned.
Sorry.
I had mentioned already about when things like this happened, where this weekend I was gonna, sit and watch this movie. Well, it was perfect timing to bring it up again, to my kids. And so I explained, that I was going to be doing this podcast today and a little bit about what this movie was, about, and my whole take on it. And so I've talked to them, about things like this before, but I brought it up again over the weekend because it was there. And so I do very much go over the types of things that are okay and not okay on the internet. And one of the things that I believe that we as educators that should be happening, that's not happening in the schools, is to be able to take these discussions into the schools.
Yeah.
I believe that educators have, should be having an open discussion about these type of topics in their classroom, to promote healthy, constructive discussion for both the females and males. And these are topics that should be discussed, such as sexuality, male dominance, the whole female body image and it being a taboo. And because we as educators have the power to do this and create, a safe and non-judgmental environment for them there, within the school. And then being able to have a separate, workshop to be able to offer support for the parents, and how they can guide their children to have a healthy, relationship. And so, because it's not being discussed at the schools, then it's important for you to get that education yourself. And so if like, for example, my kids go to a private school, they have very minimal information that they get in between 5th and 6th grade regarding sexuality. Only one of my daughters had gone one semester only to a public charter school. And it happened to be the semester that they were going to be doing the sexual education class. There was a huge difference, a very extremely huge difference. My daughter, the one that went to the charter one, came home that day and told me that they actually used the models, which is great, to show them, different anatomies of the female and male parts. And the one at the private school did not. They didn't even go into, not even cover a lot of the basic anatomy terminology. And they actually did it separately and not together. And so it's things like this that, is nerve-wracking, because they should know, and so I do go over it with my kids, especially everything that I learned when I joined the Institute to become, what I do now. Not only was I learning myself a whole lot, but I was able to bring in and teach my kids a lot more, because it was hard for me because I was not given those proper tools. I didn't go through that. And so there was a lot of things that I didn't like, that I was not given as I was going through my entire, journey, that I wanted to change when I had my own kids. And I have 6 kids. So, it's a lot to deal with. That's a lot of hormones.
Well, and I love what you said about bringing educators in. So, as far as like having the teachers already in place, like they know less about sex than like, who knows what they know about sex, but like, it's not their forte. So bringing in experts to actually teach people about healthy sexuality and healthy sexual boundaries. And I just want to say, Lucia, you beautifully outlined a job description for yourself. So, if you have hire Lucia, she is qualified. She just outlined her job description. So, so there you go. So yeah, but I mean, again, we can only communicate as comfortably about sexuality as we are comfortable with ourselves, right? And so that's why, like, teachers and parents, when we live in a society where people are just not comfortable about it, well, that's going to be transmitted to your children. And in regards, Sequita, to circling back to like, what do you tell young girls about WAP? The first thing that occurs to me is like, well, what have you been telling them all along about sexuality? Like, is this the first conversation about sex you're going to have? Is, okay, let's look at this video and blah, 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 because your kids are going to be fucking uncomfortable. I have 2 stepsons, and it's like, you know, my husband and I are both certified sexologists, and they're like, no, la, 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 la. You know, we're just like, but you we could help you so much. But they don't want to hear it, right? Because it's, you know, because of the role that we play. So if you're, you know, if this is the first time you're going to talk to your kid about sex is over the WAP video, it may not go well.
Right.
So, you know, look at it's like, what have you been telling them all along? And keeping in mind that children, when we're pre-verbal, we don't learn from words. We watch what you do. Right. As parents, and that's how we learn. So how you engage sexually is that's what you're telling me. So if you are fearful and shameful and uncomfortable with sex, guess what I'm going to be? Yeah. And I'm not going to want to come talk to you about what I just saw on the internet, because I know that you're afraid of it.
And there's so much confusion about like between sex and just embodiment. You know, so I mean, just being comfortable in your body, that nudity doesn't equal sex. You know, like that the one that little video that you shared, Sequita, with the Zulu kids dancing. And so they were all topless because, you know, it's hot for one thing. You know, it's like, so that's how, you know, they dressed. There was nobody looking at them sexually. Like, it was a mixed group, you know, of boys and girls. There was also like a male leader, you know, who was like conducting or leading that choir or that group. And what struck me is that here, like that, oh my gosh, you know, I mean, it's like they're nude, and there's just like, it's like they're just so intertwined, just the idea that a naked body is sex, you know, is sexual. And so there's so much like conditioning, and so much cultural conditioning and religious conditioning and social conditioning and all of those things that create all of that confusion. So we're talking about like parents teaching or educators educating. They can't educate someplace where they're not. I mean, it's just like you said, Davey, you know, they're coming from a wounded place. You know, they're coming from a place where they're the ones who are sexualizing kids. Yes. You know, I remember The Rock, like his daughter was like 3 or something. And she had, you know, just like a little girl, you know, of course, totally flat chested, you know, little girl. And the internet went crazy because they showed like the Rock, you know, Dwayne Johnson showed her in the pool. Like, you know, he was just a happy father, and she didn't have a top on. And they went crazy. I'm like, really? I mean, it's like she's literally like a little girl. And so in their minds, it's like he's done something wrong. But they're the ones who are confusing and sexualizing this 8-year-old, I mean, not even 8-year-old, like 3-year-old child. Yes. You know, so it's this thinking that's just so, like, I want to say, you know, like bipolar, but I don't want to offend anyone who's bipolar, because it's like, it's just, you know, this, it's definitely unwell. I mean, totally unbalanced and dysfunctional, and gives rise to all of this.
And one of the things that one of my first thoughts about the whole Cuties movie, before I actually watched the movie, when I thought it was really just about, you know, girls displaying their sexuality, because, you know, in all honesty, like, it's normal and healthy for children to explore their sexuality. That is normal. It's normal and healthy for children to mimic adults. I remember being 6 and dressing up in my mom's stuff and strutting around, right? That's normal. It's normal for little children to masturbate. That's normal. So it's children being sexual is normal. Sexuality is normal. What is not normal is the adult gaze. Yeah. It is normal for a 3-year-old to touch themselves. It is not normal for an adult to sit there and watch them. Yes. That's what's not normal.
That babies like touch themselves in the womb.
In the womb, yeah. Right? So this concept, it's not even, you know, it's yes, naked bodies aren't sexual, but even if they were, it's this fear of what is sexual, and this toxicity of what it means to even be sexual, that sexual is the same as erotic, or that sexual, like there's like in what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. Again, it is normal for little children to touch themselves. It is not normal for us to sit back and watch it. Right? It's like, okay, that's lovely. Go to your room. That's not for adults. And I think that's part of, the thing that came up for me with Cuties is like, it's normal and healthy for girls to like be discovering themselves. It would be lovely if we lived in a society where they had guidance about it. But what's not normal, and I think what's terrifying and what triggers the pedophilia thing is that is not space that adults need to be in. Like adults do not need to have their eyes on how these children are starting to discover themselves. That's not for us. That is for them.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but I remember being, very young, 11, 12, and we'd have dance-offs. Remember those? Yeah. And everybody would try to dance, and there was never an adult lurking.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
It was, so we were pure. We were expressive. It was sexy. It was fun, and no judgment.
Yeah. And sensual, right? Because we're sensual beings, right? And again, if we have in place from the time we're children, let's just fantasize here. Let's fantasize about having in place from the time we're children are parents who normalize sexuality. Like, oh yes, that is called a penis. And, and it's also called a wand of light, and it can be a tool for healing. And, and it's a wonderful sacred thing. Enjoy yourself. And that is your vulva and your vagina. And it's also called sacred space. And it's also called, lotus. And it's a beautiful flower, and it leads to pleasure and realization. And so that is the foundation. Then they can play in this atmosphere of beauty, as opposed to this atmosphere of like shame and fear and like and discomfort and toxicity. And then also abuse. Like if we're abused as children, chances are we might, do things to other children that are reflections of that abuse. Right. So that's where we get into like danger zones, in my opinion, like hearing about like, older cousins doing things to younger cousins because the older cousin was abused, because we're not talking about sex. So what we repress will express. And it will express itself in a unhealthy way. And I saw that so clearly in this movie, Cuties. I thought they did a beautiful job of really showing how that the little girl Ami, who grew up in the most repressive household, it was the most repressive household. She was the one that instigated the sexualization of the dance. Their dance up until 43 minutes, I took notes, up until 43 minutes was just girls dancing. There wasn't anything overtly sexual about it. But Ami, who grows up in this incredibly repressive, oppressive household, she was the one that influenced that turn, that sexualized it. And then at the end, I thought it was so beautiful that when Ami's voice was heard, when she was allowed to say no without being punished, she balanced. She was no longer this way or that way. She came to her own balance when she was given her voice back. When her voice was honored.
Yes.
And I think that's so important for us, again, to have in this conversation, that the toxicity that we see around sexuality is a result of the repression.
Yeah.
Systemic repression, centuries of repression.
I mean, it's interesting when you use the word voice, because like she witnessed her mother not having a voice.
Exactly.
It's like her mother, after she sort of had this nonchalant conversation on the phone, then she witnesses her crying, and it's like, so that was an expression of how she was really feeling. But, to the rest of the world, it's like, this is how it is, I mean, and I'm good, I'm cool with it. And so, so she knew that her mother wasn't being genuine. So this wasn't an authentic expression of how she really felt, and that she had no voice. She couldn't tell her husband, well, no, I'm good. We'll just, we don't need another wife or whatever. It's like she had to kind of go along with the program. Mm-hmm. So, that's the thing. It's like you're saying, there's just so many layers to it. It's not just kind of this one monolithic thing. It's just like there's layer after layer, women not having a voice. And, even like the men, just, it's like, I always like wonder like where all that shows up too. because for them, it's like, it looks like they've got a deal. But then on the other hand, it's like they're so separated. Like when I think about these videos, they're so separated from their own, their own divine self, the sacred, the connection between sexuality and sacredness. Like it's a total disconnect, which means they're disconnected from their own hearts, from their own beings. And that's like a really tragic, outcome. Like, that's really, to think that that's what's going on. And so then everybody's like all on this like dysfunctional dance.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's what, I like hit this nail on the head as often as possible, which is that the disconnection from the inherent sacredness of our sexuality is one of the core woundings on this planet. And it's the root, right? And even again in religious communities, even particularly like the Buddhist community, Buddhism is being taught by monks. That's great, like peace and blessings. But if there's no instruction about how do you address your sexuality. And I can't tell you how many men have come to work with me who are Buddhists. And they're like, I feel this dichotomy inside of me. It's like, I want to be spiritual, but I have this huge sex drive and I can't rectify that within myself. So it's like I'm stuck in this duality of God or pleasure or, spirituality or profanity, right? And as human beings, it's inherent within us, like the two, like that is the thing. Our sexual pleasure is a portal to God. It is a portal to our divinity. And the fact that we've had that connection severed, I think is one of the deepest traumas that we have as a planet. There's not going to be peace on earth if we're in fear of our own pleasure.
Yeah. I would like to hear a men's conversation around this topic, around cuties. Mm-hmm. I would love to be a fly on the wall, just to,
Well, shit,
okay, let's do that.
All right, let's do it.
You don't have to be a fly on the wall. We'll just tune in.
We'll just do it.
I would love to hear their perspective.
Yeah.
We always allow men a pass.
Yeah.
I don't think we hold them accountable to the exploitation and the sexualization and, because of whatever, strip clubs, porn, whatever, but they get a pass.
Yeah, you're right. They're not necessarily having the tough conversations. We're the ones that are having the tough conversations and connecting the dots, right? So I love that idea. So we're going to schedule a Sex is Medicine episode for that. Good idea, Sequita.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah. So on that note, I had a discussion with two friends last night. They have not seen the Cuties, but we were talking about WAP because we saw that together. And the question came up is, how do we reclaim our sexuality when it is defined by men's values and through their lens? How do we reclaim something that and this was their premise, that we've never had?
Yeah.
That's the question. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I have my thoughts on that, so I can get started with that. And I would say that it's not something that we've never had. I think that, I remember clearly as a child exploring my own vulva and being fascinated with it. And I remember connecting with my body through dance and through movement. And it was less about, what I saw externally. It was more about me and my own connection to my body. And, as humans, we were given everything we needed to live here peacefully and in harmony. It's a lot of this is inherent within us. Human sexuality is inherent within us. We are traumatized and conditioned away from it. So I really view this as a reclamation. I don't view it as getting something that we never had. I view it as reclaiming what was lost, reclaiming what was stolen from us by society, right? Because again, I remember being 6-7 years old and masturbating. And I was like, wow, I didn't understand what the fuck was happening. And I never had an orgasm. I remember like reaching this peak and like, is it ever going to end? Like, oh my God, it was like so much pleasure. I felt like I was going to explode. But sexual exploration is normal and healthy. And we're going to do it because humans are curious, like that we really are. And so that's why it's so important for the adults in our environment to create a container of safety around it. So we know that it's safe to say, I did this thing, I touched my thing and it felt nice. And the adults can say, oh yeah, that's called your clitoris. Yeah, and that it brings pleasure, and have, age appropriate conversations about it. And one person that shows up on my radar a lot, who is really beautiful is the word that's coming to me, about the way she interacts with her child, very young child, about sexuality and age appropriate, and basically, answering what they ask and not a whole lot more, is a woman named Lex. I just know her handle, Lex Sex Doctor. And she founded the Institute for Intimacy. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm going to put a link to her work underneath us. Underneath this video for all you listeners, and of course I'll send it to you guys, but she wrote a book that was on our shop page that we recommend for parents to use to talk to their kids about sex. But she makes it so simple, and yet part of what she talks about on social media is how, it's challenging. It's like, okay, here's another, like, am I gonna fucking traumatize my daughter? Or am I gonna fuck her up, or am I gonna win this one? Am I gonna be able to communicate in a way that's like appropriate and received and non-traumatizing? So it's this beautiful journey that she's sharing with us. And it's such beautiful modeling for the rest of us of like what's possible when you have adults, what's possible for children when the adults around them are comfortable talking about sex and find it, and celebrate pleasure, and aren't afraid of like honoring children's inherent curiosity and their inherent sexual curiosity. Right? So that's the thing. Circling back to your question, we've always had it. It's inherent within us. This is a journey of reclamation. And how do we know how to do it? By what feels good to us. What feels good to our bodies. What feels good to our souls. What feels good to our minds. What is nourishing. And allowing for that to evolve and change. What was nourishing for me 13 years ago is not the same thing that's nourishing for me now. Great, I've evolved. How awesome. Yeah. Anything else you guys want to add? No? Okay.
I mean, you'll just be considered an anarchist for that statement, Davy.
The wonderful thing about being told that you didn't belong on this planet is that I haven't really felt a need to belong on this planet. So I'm good. I'm okay with not fitting in. So unfortunately, we're almost out of time, but we have a great idea for another show. And many, many more. Thank you guys so much for joining me. So for people who love what you have to say and are inspired by you, let's do a round of your website and where you're located and how people can contact you. I'll start with you, lovely Sequita.
Okay, I'm Sequita Whitfield, and you can find me in San Diego at www.simply-tantra.com. That's simply-tantra.com.
And you have a really awesome quiz on your website that I've been admiring.
Oh, thank you.
What is that quiz?
Just 3 blocks to bliss. Discover your 3 blocks to bliss.
All right. So you should go to simply-tantra.com and discover your 3 blocks to bliss. And how about you, Lucia? What is your website and where you're in California too? Are you guys able to breathe down there?
It's better now.
Okay,
a little bit better now. A couple of weeks back, it was horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am located in the San Francisco Bay Area of Oakland, and my website is it's Embodied Elements with the -WP.com.
Yeah, embodiedelements.com. Beautiful. And then you, lovely Karen Craig.
I'm Karen Craig. ExploreTantra.com and Explore Tantra on all social media channels. So Instagram, Twitter. I think that's it.
Facebook.
Is there one more I'm missing?
Facebook. Facebook.
Yeah. Facebook. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And Karen's also one of the faculty members here at the Institute of Authentic Tantra Education and helps train practitioners in these healing tools for awakening bliss and joy in every area of life. Yeah. Yay. Awesome. Awesome. This was such an enriching conversation. I feel so full. I'm so grateful. And I look forward to more. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening or morning or whenever you happen to listen to this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for wanting to have these conversations and expand our concepts and our awareness of what's possible. So love you guys reaching out to us. I mentioned that on another episode, how I so value and appreciate when you shoot me emails and let me know, hey, I've been listening to your episode, blah, blah, blah. Like, I so love it. This inspires us to keep going. And you can stay connected at authentictantra.com. You can go there and get our free ebook, Tantra is Medicine, Healing with the Tibetan 5 Elements. And you can sign up for your Sex is Medicine updates and get each episode delivered hot and fresh to your inbox every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. And we have all kinds of other fun stuff. And make sure you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the platforms at Authentic Tantra. Yay! Thank you so much. Peace and blessings. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.